She moved into the house nobody wanted, and what she found beneath its floor changed everything. Can you imagine being so desperate that you'd accept living somewhere people swear is cursed? It sounds like a legend, but this story really happened long ago in the forgotten hills of San Isidro del Viento. Before we go on, think for a moment about the hardest decision you've ever made for your family, because what this woman did for hers would cost her far more than she ever expected. The summer sun beat down mercilessly on the dusty streets of San Isidro. The air shimmered, thick with heat and silence. Lucia Navarro, a 25-year-old widow, walked the narrow dirt path carrying her 3-year-old son Diego in her arms. Her older boy, Emilio, followed barefoot, clutching her torn skirt with tiny fingers that had already known too much hardship. Lucia's skin was brown and cracked from years under the sun. Her once lively black hair was tied back in a careless braid. She looked older than her years. Grief had a way of aging a person fast. 6 months earlier, her husband Rafael had left the north, chasing the same mirage as many other men, a job, a chance, a better life. He promised to send money, to return soon with enough to build a real house. For a while, letters came. Then they stopped. No word, no body, just silence. In their village, a woman without a husband was invisible, or worse, a burden. Lucia had no land, no money, and nowhere to go. The neighbors pitied her, but pity didn't feed children. And pity could turn cruel when the powerful decided you no longer belonged. 3 weeks after everyone accepted that Rafael was gone for good, Don Mateo Vargas, the local landowner and the most feared man in town, sent for her. Lucia entered his large adobe house with trembling hands, her boys clinging to her legs. Vargas didn't even look up from his glass of mezcal as she spoke. "My husband worked hard, Don Mateo," she said softly. "We owed you, yes, but I can keep the house. I'll work. Please. I just need a roof for my children." Vargas finally lifted his eyes, small, sharp, and empty of mercy. "Your husband's debts were his own," he said. "The house is mine. I've got another family waiting to move in. Be grateful I give you until Sunday." Her knees nearly buckled. "Please, my sons." "The world doesn't stop for widows," he interrupted, waving her away like an insect. Lucia left in silence, her boy's hands in hers, her heart burning with humiliation. She spent the next days going door to door, offering to cook, clean, wash clothes, anything. But every door closed. No one wanted trouble with Don Mateo. By Friday night, she was sitting beneath a twisted pepper tree on the edge of town, staring at the horizon, her sons half asleep beside her. She whispered prayers into hot wind, but the only answer was the rustling of dry grass. That's when she heard an old woman's voice. "Child," said Dona Ramona, the village healer, approaching with a slow, deliberate gait. "The coyote drive the lamb from the valley, but even the lamb must find a rock to hide beneath." Lucia looked up, her eyes hollow. "And where am I supposed to hide, Nana? Nobody wants us." Dona Ramona's wrinkled hand pointed toward a hill where the skeleton of an old hacienda stood against the orange sky. "The Vargas hacienda," she said. "It's been empty since before I was born. No one dares go there. They say it belongs to her, the crying woman who lost her child." Lucia shivered. Everyone in San Isidro knew the legend of Dona Isabella de Vargas, whose husband had been killed during the Revolution, and whose little boy had drowned or disappeared, depending on who told it. Isabella had gone mad searching for him until she was found dead beneath the agave trees. Since then, her ghost was said to wander the ruins, calling for her son. Lucia stared at the distant silhouette. "And no one lives there? No one who wants to stay alive," the old woman murmured. "The land is cursed." Lucia's gaze shifted to her sleeping children. She thought of the hunger waiting at dawn, of the empty roads and cold nights ahead. A curse was easier to face than starvation. That evening, she lifted Diego into her arms, took Emilio by the hand, and started walking toward the hill. The sun dipped low, bleeding red across the sky as the ruined hacienda came into view, its cracked walls and broken archways like the bones of a giant. The gate creaked open with a groan, that sounded almost human. The air smelled of dust and wildflowers and something else. Sorrow. Emilio clutched her arm. Mama, I don't like it. Lucia forced a smile she didn't feel. It's only an old house. Carino. We'll clean it up. It'll be ours. A castle for the three of us. She pushed open the heavy wooden door. The inside was cold and damp, filled with cobwebs and the faint rustle of wings. No furniture. No people. Just silence. Still, she found a small room at the back, half collapsed but with enough roof to keep out the night. She swept the dirt floor, lit a small fire, and wrapped her sons in their only blanket. Outside, the wind howled through the ruins, carrying a faint, distant cry, like a woman's wail lost in the dark. Lucia closed her eyes and whispered, "Protect us, Holy Mother, please." That first night, she didn't sleep. The next morning began the hardest days of her life. Each dawn, Lucia walked miles to fetch water and search for work in the village. She washed strangers' clothes until her fingers bled and sold bundles of firewood for a few coins. When people saw her in the market, they crossed themselves and whispered, "That's the widow living in the cursed house." But she ignored them. The ruins, broken as they were, had given her what no one else would, a home, until one afternoon when Emilio shouted from the courtyard, "Mama, the ground sounds hollow here." Lucia frowned, walked over, and stomped her foot on the spot he pointed to. A dull echo answered back. Well, beneath dirt, she knelt, brushed away the dust, and uncovered an old trapdoor with a rusted iron ring. Her heart pounded. What could possibly be buried there? As the sun set behind the hills, she stood staring at the hatch, the wind whispering through cracks of the old hacienda. She didn't yet know it, but what waited beneath that door would not only reveal the truth behind the town's legend, it would awaken something that had been buried for generations. Lucia waited until her children were asleep before lighting a small oil lamp. The faint glow painted trembling shadows on the cracked walls as she stared at the trapdoor. Every instinct told her to leave it alone, to forget it. But curiosity has a way of whispering louder than fear. She gripped the iron ring and pulled, though it gave way with a splintering groan, releasing a gust of cold, stale air that smelled like damp soil and time itself. Beneath, a narrow staircase descended into the darkness. Lucia's heart thudded in her chest. She looked back toward the room where Diego and Emilio slept, their tiny chests rising and falling in rhythm with the fire's dying glow. She whispered a prayer, lifted the lamp, and began to climb down. The steps were uneven stone, slick with moisture. Each creak and drop of water echoed like a whisper in the narrow space. At the bottom, the passage opened into a small chamber, a hidden cellar, carved directly into the earth. Lucia lifted the lamp higher. Dust motes floated in the golden light. In one corner, beneath a tattered cloth, she saw the outline of several chests, wooden trunks bound with iron, their surfaces blackened with age. Her hands trembled. She approached the first trunk, brushed off the dust, and lifted the lid. Inside was not gold or coins, but something stranger, rows of ancient objects, shimmering faintly under the lamplight. Masks carved from jade, obsidian figurines, painted pottery with symbols she couldn't understand. It felt like standing inside a buried temple. She opened another chest. Inside, bundles wrapped in faded linen. Unfolding one, she found fragile manuscripts drawn on deer skin and amati paper, covered in unknown hieroglyphs. And in the last chest, a single book. Its cover was leather, its pages yellowed by time. On the first page, written in elegant handwriting, were the words, "Journal of Don Alejandro Vargas, Year of our Lord 1913. Lucia's breath caught. The Vargas name. It was the same family the townspeople still spoke with hushed voices, the same name tied to the curse of the crying woman. She sat on the cold floor, opened the book carefully, and began to read. The journal spoke of Don Alejandro, husband of Dona Isabella, the woman whose ghost was said to haunt the hacienda. But he hadn't been a simple landowner. He had been an explorer, obsessed with ancient treasures. "I have found a burial cave of the old gods," he wrote. "The fools call it sacred ground, but I call it discovery. Within lie the riches of forgotten empire, Jade, gold, knowledge. It shall bear my name. The further Lucia read, the colder her hands grew. He described desecrating a sacred site deep in the mountains, taking everything he found, ignoring the old shaman who warned him that the earth remembers. You have awakened what was meant to sleep, the shaman had told him. The clay and the jade hold the spirit of the ancestors. You have stolen not gold, but souls. The land will not forget. Don Alejandro had written off the warning as superstition, but his later entries turned frantic. Speaking of voices in the night, shadows watching him, his workers disappearing, and his wife's descent into madness. Ines cries for our son, he wrote, but I fear it is not grief that calls her name. It is the land reclaiming what I took. The final page was smeared with something dark. Ink, maybe blood. The revolution is closing in. I have sealed the relics below the floor. No one will find them. If they do, may the curse fall upon them all. Lucia slammed the book shut, her pulse racing. She understood now. The house wasn't cursed because of ghosts. It was cursed because of what was stolen. The Vargas family had brought ruin upon themselves, and now she was standing on the same ground, over the same secret. The lamp flickered violently as a gust of air swept through the cellar. For a second, she thought she heard something, a faint whisper, like a woman's sob carried through the walls. She grabbed the lamp and stumbled up the stairs, slamming the trapdoor shut above her. She sat there in the dark, breathing hard, feeling the weight of centuries pressing down. Whatever was buried there, she told herself, needed to stay buried. Days passed, but peace never returned. Lucia tried to forget what she had seen, but every time she swept the floor, she felt it, that hollow echo beneath her feet, like something breathing. At night, she'd hear the sound again, a distant sigh, almost like crying. Then, one evening, Diego began to cough. At first, it was a small, harmless sound, but within days, his fever grew unbearable. His tiny body burned, his lips cracked, and his breathing turned shallow. Lucia tried every herbal remedy she knew. Dona Ramona came and prayed over him, leaving herbs and words of comfort, but the child only worsened. Soon, even Emilio stopped speaking, sitting silently by his brother's side as if afraid to move. Lucia felt madness creeping in. She had no money left, no medicine, no hope. That night, as she sat beside the dying fire, holding Diego's trembling hand, the memory of the jade mask flashed before her eyes. That treasure, those relics, could buy medicine, could save him. Her stomach twisted. The words of the old shaman echoed from the journal. The jade and the clay hold the spirit of the ancestors. You have stolen not gold, but souls. Then let them take mine, she whispered, her voice breaking, if that's what it costs. She kissed her son's burning forehead, rose, and went to the courtyard. The ground was cool under her knees as she dug with her bare hands, nails tearing, blood mixing with the dirt until she found the trapdoor again. When she lifted it this time, she didn't hesitate. Lucia descended into the dark, the lamp shaking in her trembling grip. Her breath came in ragged gasps as she tore open one of the trunks and grabbed the smallest mask she could find, a face of jade, serene and beautiful. She wrapped it in cloth, pressed it to her chest, and whispered through tears, "Forgive me." Then she ran into the night, toward the town, toward salvation, toward the curse she could no longer avoid. Lucia reached the main road just before dawn. The world was silent, gray, and cold. Her feet were raw and bleeding from miles of walking, the jade mask heavy against her chest like a heartbeat. But she didn't stop. Each step was a prayer. Each breath, a promise. He will live. By midday, she saw the distant rooftops of Oaxaca City rising like a mirage out of the dust. Lucia had never seen so many people in one place. The noise, the smells, the unfamiliar faces, it all pressed against her like a wave. But desperation made her fearless. She wandered through streets lined with vendors, clutching her cloth bundle tight, until she found a narrow alley where a wooden sign read, "Antigades y Curiosities." Her throat tightened. This was it. Inside, the shop smelled of old wood and secrets. A man in a suit, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, looked up from behind the counter. "Can I help you?" he asked, voice smooth but calculating. Lucia hesitated, then slowly unwrapped the mask. The man's eyes widened. A spark of greed flickered before he quickly hid it behind a polite smile. "Where did you get this?" he asked softly. "It was my grandmother's," Lucia lied, her voice trembling. "It's all I have left. I need to sell it for medicine." He examined the mask with careful fingers, turning it under the light. "This is exquisite craftsmanship," he murmured, though his tone was too calm, too rehearsed. Then, after a pause, he said, "It's beautiful, but the market is flooded with fakes these days. I can offer you 200 pesos. That's generous. 200 pesos. Lucia had no idea what it was truly worth, but she heard medicine in that number, hope in that number. She nodded quickly. "Yes, please." He handed her the money, crisp bills that felt heavier than gold. "Pleasure doing business," he said, his smile never reaching his eyes. As she turned to leave, she felt his gaze follow her, predatory, calculating. The bell above the door chimed as she stepped out, clutching the money like it was life itself. She didn't waste a second. By evening, she found a small pharmacy and a tired-looking doctor willing to see her son. With the medicine in her satchel, she began the long walk back home through the dark, endless stretch of desert road. The stars burned cold above her, and the wind whispered through the mesquite trees. Every step back towards San Isidro felt heavier. Every shadow behind her seemed to move. But she kept walking until her body finally gave out at sunrise, collapsing just outside Dona Ramona's hut. The old woman rushed to her, startled. "Lucia, child, what have you done to yourself?" Lucia barely managed to whisper, "The medicine for Diego, please." Then everything went black. When she woke, the sky was soft with afternoon light. Her body ached, but her heart leapt at the sound of laughter nearby. She turned her head, and there was Diego, sitting up, color returning to his cheeks. Emilio fed him spoonfuls of broth, while Dona Ramona watched with knowing sadness. Lucia wept quietly. Her son was alive. Her desperate gamble had worked. Days passed, and Diego grew stronger. The house no longer felt like a tomb. It was full of noise again, the laughter of children echoing against the broken walls. For the first time in months, Lucia allowed herself to smile. But peace, she would soon learn, is fragile. Rumors began to spread, whispers in the market, murmurs by the well. The widow bought medicine, expensive medicine. People said, "Where did she get the money?" "From that cursed house." And those whispers reached the ears of Don Mateo Vargas. It was late afternoon when Lucia saw 2 unfamiliar horses tied outside the ruined gate. 2 men waited by the courtyard. Strangers, but not the kind one meets by accident. One was short and broad, a scar running down his cheek. The other tall, lean, with a city man's sharpness in his stance. Lucia froze. Her sons were playing near the door. She pulled them close, her heart hammering. The man with the scar smiled, but was a smile without warmth. "Senor Navarro," he called. "We'd like to have a word." "I don't know you," she said, forcing calm. "Oh, but we know you," the tall man replied, tipping his hat. "A friend of ours in Oaxaca told us about a lovely young widow who sold him something very interesting. A little green mask, was it?" Lucia's mouth went dry. She said nothing. The scarred man took a step closer. "You see, our friend is very eager to find more of those pretty things, and we're here to help him collect." He looked around the courtyard. "So, why don't you save us some time and tell us where the rest are hidden?" "There's nothing here," she whispered. "Please leave us alone." The man chuckled. "Lady, if you make us look for it, things might get unpleasant." His gaze drifted toward the doorway, where Diego stood clutching his brother's arm. Lucia's breath caught in her throat. Her heart screamed, but her face stayed still. "I don't have anything," she said again, louder this time. "You're wasting your time." The scarred man reached out, grabbing her wrist, but before he could speak again, a calm voice cut through the air. "Excuse me," it said. "Am I interrupting something?" All 3 turned. A man stood at the entrance to the courtyard, middle-aged, gray at the temples, wearing a white linen shirt and round spectacles. Behind him, A young assistant carried a camera and a notebook. Lucia's eyes widened. She recognized him, the doctor from Oaxaca, the one who'd given her the medicine. "Who are you?" snapped the tall man. The newcomer smiled mildly. "Dr. Arturo Morales. I work with the National Institute of Anthropology and History, and you gentlemen are trespassing on what appears to be a very important archaeological site." He produced a leather badge from his pocket. The men hesitated. "You see," the doctor continued, "we've been tracking stolen pre-Hispanic relics for some time now, and according to my reports, one such artifact was sold in Oaxaca just days ago by a woman named Lucia Navarro." Lucia's heart nearly stopped, but the doctor's gaze softened as he turned to her. "I'm not here to arrest you," he said gently. "You saved your child. Anyone would have done the same. But these men," he looked back at the strangers, "these men aren't collectors. They're thieves." The scarred man cursed under his breath, spitting to the ground. "We'll be seeing you again, doctor." The two mounted their horses and rode off in a storm of dust. When silence returned, Lucia's legs gave out. She fell to her knees, trembling. Her children ran to her, sobbing, and she pulled them close. Dr. Morales waited quietly, then spoke in a low, steady voice. "You're in danger now. Those men will be back, and they won't come alone." Lucia looked up at him, her face pale. "What do they want?" "The same thing everyone's wanted from this land since the beginning," he said softly. "What's buried beneath it?" She met his gaze, and for the first time saw no greed there, only concern. "Help me protect it," he said, "before it destroys more lives." Night settled heavily over the hills of San Isidro. The air hung thick and silent, carrying the scent of agave and dust. Inside the ruined hacienda, Lucia sat beside the faint glow of a lamp, her son sleeping at her side. Dr. Arturo Morales waited across from her, patient, calm, his notebook untouched. "You already know what I found," she said finally, her voice breaking the silence. "I didn't mean to steal it. I had no choice." The doctor nodded. "You did what any mother would. You saved your child." He leaned forward, his expression kind. "But what you discovered, Senora Navarro, it's more than treasure. It's a chapter of history thought to be lost forever." Lucia's fingers tightened on the fabric of her skirt. "And because of it, my sons are in danger. That's exactly why I'm here," Morales said gently, "to help you end that danger." He took a slow breath. "The artifact you sold, the jade mask, it's not just valuable. It's sacred. Stolen from an ancient Zapotec tomb by Don Alejandro Vargas himself. Over a century ago. His theft condemned this place. That's why people call it cursed." Lucia glanced toward the floorboards, the hidden trapdoor beneath them. "The curse isn't a story, doctor. I've heard her crying. I felt the ground breathe." Morales met her eyes, not with disbelief, but a strange understanding. Perhaps the curse isn't from ghosts, but from guilt, from what was taken. He looked at her with quiet intensity. "Show me, Lucia. Please." For a long moment, she didn't move. She remembered the whispering walls, the icy air from the cellar, the old journal written by a man who lost his mind. But then she thought her children, sleeping soundly only because a stranger had risked coming back for them. Finally, she stood. "Follow me," she said. The three of them, Lucia, Morales, and his young assistant Ricardo, crossed the courtyard, the lamp's flickering light painting their shadows across the broken walls. Lucia knelt, brushed aside the dirt, and revealed the iron ring buried beneath it. Her hands hesitated, trembling, then pulled. The trapdoor groaned open, exhaling a cold breath that smelled of stone and time. Dr. Morales crouched beside it, eyes shining. Incredible. Lucia led the way down, her lamp casting rippling light along the narrow stairs. The air grew cooler, heavier, until they reached a small underground chamber. Ricardo gasped. Before them stood the three chests, still covered in dust but glowing faintly under the lamplight, like forgotten relics of a sleeping world. Dr. Morales removed his glasses, awestruck. "Good Lord, these pieces are priceless." He knelt by one of the trunks, lifting its lid carefully. Pre-Columbian jade masks, Codices, even ceremonial pottery. They've survived untouched. He looked up at Lucia. You found a missing archive of the Vargas expedition. She didn't answer. Her eyes were on the walls. The strange marks carved into stone, Spiral Sun's eyes. Symbols she didn't recognize, yet somehow felt. Morales' voice softened. This belongs to your ancestors, Lucia, and to every child who deserves to know where they come from. But it must be protected. If those men return, they'll destroy everything. Lucia's gaze hardened. What do you want me to do? He stood, dust on his hands. Help us move it tonight. The Institute can safeguard these relics. I'll make sure you and your sons are relocated. Somewhere safe, far from San Isidro. You'll have a new home, a small salary, a fresh start. Her throat tightened. Why help me? Morales paused, his eyes full of weariness. Because my grandfather was part of the Vargas expedition. He carried guilt for what they did until his dying day. Helping this land heal is how I make it right. That night, as the wind howled outside, they worked in silence. Ricardo brought empty crates from their jeep, and together they began wrapping each artifact in layers of cloth. The air inside the cellar felt almost alive, as if watching. Lucia's movements were careful, reverent. She lifted each mask as though it were breathing, each vase as though it held a heartbeat. For the first time, she didn't feel like a trespasser. She felt like a guardian. Dr. Morales whispered, "Handle them with respect. These aren't riches, they're memories." Lucia nodded. And memories deserve to be remembered, not buried. Hours passed. The last of the treasures was packed when a sudden sound froze them all. Horses, far away, but approaching fast. Dr. Morales extinguished the lamp with sharp motion. Quiet. They held their breath, the darkness pressing against them. Bootsteps crunched outside the ruins, voices muttering, then fading toward the hillside. Minutes stretched like hours. Finally, silence returned. Morales whispered, "They're searching. We have to move now." By midnight, the first crate was loaded into the back of the jeep. The sky was overcast, hiding the moon. Lucia carried her sons, half asleep, wrapping them in shawls as Ricardo secured the final box. "Once we reach the Tehuacan, we'll change vehicles," Morales said. "No one will follow us there." Lucia turned back toward the hacienda, her home, her prison, her miracle. The old walls loomed like the skeleton of a forgotten god. She thought of the curse, of Dona Isabella's cries, of the journal's last words. May the curse fall upon them all. Maybe it already had. Maybe it was ending tonight. She whispered a prayer for the house, for the spirits within, and climbed into the jeep. The engine roared softly to life. Without headlights, they rolled down the dirt road into the darkness. Hours later, as they crossed the valley, the first light of dawn touched the horizon. Lucia sat in the back seat, her children asleep beside her, the wind tugging at her hair. Dr. Morales glanced at her through the mirror. "Once we get to Mexico City, you'll be safe. I promise." She didn't answer at first. She looked back, watching the silhouette of the hacienda fade against the pale sky. Then quietly she said, "I don't want to run forever. I want people to know what happened there, that it wasn't a curse. It was history." Morales smiled faintly. "Then you'll tell it. You'll be its guardian." But as the jeep disappeared into the mountains, far behind them, Don Mateo Vargas stood on the hill overlooking the ruins. His jaw was tight, his eyes dark with greed. He had found the trapdoor, and beneath it, only empty dirt. He clenched his fists and spat into the dust. "She's taken it," he muttered. "Everything." Then, turning to his men, he said coldly, "Find her." The journey to Mexico City took 2 days. By the time they arrived, Lucia's body was weak, but her spirit had begun to mend. Her children laughed again. For the first time in months, they slept without fear. Dr. Morales arranged for them to stay in a small apartment above the Institute. The city outside was alive. No ghosts, no wind, no whispers, just the noise of life. Lucia almost believed the curse had ended. Almost. 3 nights later, as rain lashed the streets, Morales returned from a meeting, his face pale. "They know," he said quietly, closing the door behind him. Don Mateo's men tracked us to Puebla. They'll come for you next. Lucia's heart stopped. How? We left everything behind. Morales looked at the crates stacked near the wall, filled with the artifacts they had rescued. Because of these, he wants them back. To him, they're not history, they're power. Lucia held her sons close. What do we do? The doctor hesitated. There's one place they won't follow. The old Vargas burial cave, the place Alejandro stole from. If we return the relics there, the legend says the earth will reclaim its peace. Lucia's eyes widened. You believe the curse is real? He exhaled slowly. I believe some debts aren't written in books, Senor Navarro. They're written in the ground. The next morning, before sunrise, they loaded the crates into the jeep once more and headed south, toward the mountains that bordered the Mixtec lands. Fog rolled across the valleys. The road slick with mud. The deeper they drove, the quieter the world became. No birds, no wind, just a low growl of the engine. By dusk, they reached the base of a limestone ridge. A narrow trail led upward into the dark. Morales lit a lantern, handed one to Lucia, and whispered, From here, we walk. The cave mouth yawned before them like a wound in the mountain. Lucia's breath fogged in the cold air as they stepped inside. The sound of dripping water echoed endlessly. The walls were covered in symbols, the same spirals and eyes that had marked the cellar. It's the same writing, Lucia murmured. The same as the hacienda. Morales nodded. The same story, only older. This is where it began. They moved deeper until they reached a natural altar carved into stone. Lucia knelt and unwrapped the first artifact, the jade mask, the one that had started everything. She placed it carefully on the altar's surface. The air shifted. A faint, low hum filled the cave. The lantern flames flickered wildly. Morales whispered, It's as if the mountain itself is breathing. Lucia's eyes welled with tears. Please, she whispered to the darkness, I didn't mean to disturb you. I only want to save my child. Let this end. Let them rest. Her words hung in the air like smoke. Then, somewhere deep within the cave came a soft, unmistakable sound. A woman's voice, crying. Outside, thunder cracked across the sky. And on the trail below, Don Mateo Vargas and his men arrived, drenched and furious. They followed the light from the lanterns into the cave, rifles in hand. When Lucia heard the echo of footsteps, she froze. They're here, she whispered. Dr. Morales grabbed her arm. Stay behind me. But Mateo's voice boomed through the cavern. Lucia Navarro, I warned you never to cross me. You think you can steal from a Vargas and live. He stepped into the light, his face twisted with rage, eyes gleaming like a madman's. His men fanned out behind him, guns raised. Lucia stood, trembling but unyielding. These things don't belong to you. They never did. Your family cursed this land long before I ever came here. Cursed? Mateo laughed coldly. You speak of curses while you dig through Vargas blood? Everything here, everything, belongs to me. He strode toward the altar, reaching for the jade mask. Don't touch it, Morales shouted. You don't understand. But Mateo grabbed it anyway, and the mountain roared. The ground trembled violently. Cracks split the cave floor, sending shards of stone tumbling into the darkness below. Mateo screamed as the mask in his hand began to burn, glowing with a blinding green light. From the walls came the echo of hundreds of voices, men, women, children, crying, wailing, chanting. Lucia clutched her sons, shielding their faces as the air grew thick with the sound of weeping. Morales yelled, Get out! Everyone out! But Mateo staggered backward, eyes wide with terror. The mask fused to his palm. No, it's mine, he screamed. Then the floor beneath him gave way. He fell, swallowed by the earth, the jade light vanishing into the depths. And just like that, silence. The cave's roar faded to a whisper. The trembling ceased. Lucia's lamp flickered once, then steadied. The crying stopped. When dawn came, the cave was still again. They buried what was left of the relics at the altar, sealing them beneath stones and prayers. Morales said a few quiet words in Zapotec, words his grandfather had taught him. Lucia stood beside him, her sons clinging to her dress. "It's over," she whispered. "The house, the curse, it's all over." Morales nodded. "The earth takes back what's hers." As they stepped out of the cave, the first sunlight broke through clouds. A single ray touched the valley below, the ruins of San Isidro glimmering faintly, as if washed clean by time. Weeks later, Lucia began a new life near Oaxaca City. She worked at the Institute, helping catalog the recovered artifacts, learning their stories, preserving what her ancestors had left behind. Dr. Morales often told his colleagues that she was not just a witness to history, she was its protector. At night, when her children slept, Lucia sometimes dreamed of the old house. In her dreams, she saw a woman standing at the gate, Dona Isabella, serene and smiling, no longer crying. Lucia would wake with tears on her cheeks, whispering softly, "Rest now, we're free." But somewhere deep beneath the earth, in the silence of the buried cave, the jade mask still glowed faintly in the dark, waiting, because history never dies. It only sleeps